Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Critical Issues Forum online teachers workshop. So today we are going to have a language workshop by Ms. Mary Butcher, and I'm so happy to have her for this year's teachers workshop again. So let me briefly introduce her to other teachers. So Professor Mary Butcher has been working at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies since 2002. She specializes in English for specific purposes, assisting students to develop their research, writing, and presentation skills. Professor Butcher has taught writing and research skills in the English Language for Non-Proliferation program and a Visiting Fellows program for Center for Non-Proliferation Studies at MIS. English for diplomatic negotiations and conference presentations to diplomats and business people in the custom language program, and graduate and undergraduate writing, research, and critical thinking skills in the ESL English as a second language and English for academic and professional purposes programs at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. So her first lecture today is going to be research methodology. So now I'm going to give you the microphone.
Thank you, Masako. It's a pleasure to be with you again and to work with the students and teachers. So welcome, teachers. This first lecture is on research methodologies. We would like to focus on research skills because that is kind of the heart of course, the mini project and also the larger project that students may do if they're doing a presentation. Let's talk about the four workshops in the series. We'll be starting with research methodologies today and citing sources accurately, followed by focusing your message and making effective presentations. We'd like to start off with research methodologies, and I'd like to speak to the importance of really getting authoritative sources, really doing deep, meaningful research. Of course, the students are going to be grasping with difficult topics and looking at the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty as a focal area. So they're going to need to be able to engage in these complex topics and do a lot of collaborative work. So one of the themes or threads I'd like to emphasize for our talks would be the importance of collaboration, talking together, working in their teams, really digging deeply into the questions. It's all about the critical research questions. So let's take a look at the process. With the research process, of course, our starting point is always a research idea or question. And where does the question bubble up from? Well, we need to do a lot of brainstorming and investigating and exploring of ideas. So I would very much encourage you to spend sufficient time with students to really have them hone their ideas. This is so critical. Then some studies talk about doing literature review or just surveying the material that's already available. So of course, from the content lectures, you have already received some excellent content from experts that you can use and use as direct sources. There will be those sources, there will be possibly interviews and other resources that students are going to have direct access to. I would also encourage students to use their local libraries. Hopefully the school libraries have some resources in their databases where they can explore and get into some good sources, not just Google, but maybe getting into databases that have authoritative sources and well-researched journals on their topics. And then they're going to be in the process of forming questions and then figuring out, narrowing their questions and figuring out kind of a design and plan, figuring out their organizational strategy. So this will come into play slightly differently depending on the genre that they choose. Masako will be discussing with you all the different options for the mini project and what types of projects students can do, whether they choose to do a full research paper or a Prezi or a blog or website or some other genre. Everybody still needs to map out a plan and collect data, continue to ask questions, and then revise. So it's really important to consider revising your questions or asking new questions as the process continues before coming up with any conclusions. I also might add to consider the sources and potential biases of particular sources. So to be very, again, critical and scrutinizing of appropriate sources. So in the brainstorming phase, some people are very visual learners, so they need to learn by mapping things out. So we can call this clustering or mind mapping, where we might actually draw a picture and we would have something central in as a main idea, and then just all the associative ideas that occur in the process of brainstorming. And then we would do the same thing with asking questions. You can have students free write questions, you can put them on the board or on notes. Here we often put things on little post-it sticky notes and then put them up as related questions and help us to organize our questions. Here's an example of clustering, right, where it's very visual. You kind of make a visual map of your ideas, main ideas, subpoints, and develop it. Students may want to look at last year's presentations, which were excellent. Also, there's things in the archives that students have done that they can refer to. They may want to look at the CTBT site itself and look at what are the ideas that are already coming online that are going to be explored at the conference. Maybe they can relate that to their specific questions that they may have. So questioning and you know, the stage of inquiry is, of course, very important. Looking at what is your current research question and who is engaged in the discussion or debate. So basically, the students are entering this arena of an ongoing conversation. I like to think about research as this ongoing conversation. It's already happening, and now we're just more people entering the room, deepening the conversation and having more opportunities for interaction. And it may be in the form of just doing research on the internet, or it might actually be through the content lectures, or it might be through actual interviews. So personal interviews, of course, are the best if you have that opportunity, if you happen to have somebody you can reach out to. But if you also just look at the literature and explore what is existing in the field, that's great. I put a couple of actually hot links here on these two pictures here. So the youth for CTBT actually will take you to the youth group page. So there's amazing amount of resources that youth have already produced and have engaged on this topic. So it's a great starting place to see what conversations are already happening, what research material has already been produced, and how a student or a team could add to that conversation. Also, I put a hot link to our critical issues forum, so students can can immediately link back to topics that have been done in the past and kind of get a sample of the type of genre of material that has, how students have presented their material, whether it's been in a research paper or presentation or so on. So as the students begin to go into their conversations and go into this new landscape, I think it's really important to make sure that everyone is familiar with the terminology. So each industry has its own, and each discipline has its own terminology and kind of language in and of itself, right? Here at the Institute, we have so many different disciplines and departments, and everybody has kind of their own languages within those disciplines, in policy, in CNS, in all these different disciplines that we offer right here on campus. So you want to make sure that everybody in your team is familiar with that language. And I mean not just within English, but within the context of the discipline. So what kind of new vocabulary words do we need to make sure everyone knows and is familiar with? What kind of concepts and maybe procedures or things do we all need to make sure we're all on the same page on? So that's a good thing to for students to do in teams, to work out, make sure that they know the common language. So for example, when they're starting out, there may be some definitions that they need to work on. You know, do they have to define anything related to certain processes like nuclear fission or fusion? Do they have to discern about those two things? Do they need to, where do they want to begin their discussion and conversation? And what kind of resources are going to be most useful and fruitful to them? Also in the data collecting process, and a really important thing right now is making sure that sources are reliable. So how do we judge reliable sources? Usually we have to check multiple sources to do some fact checking to make sure that the information is current and is accurate. So you as teachers can help guide your students as to how current you want the information to be. Also when you do a search in your library and in your databases, you might have the option to search based on currency, based on relevance to your topic or on currency. So I would recommend to always check the source, see if it's credible, who the author is, what is her expertise in the field, are you working with primary sources, and as you go along, can you cite these sources, make sure you're keeping track of where you get your sources, and always you want to make sure to attribute credit to the sources. So we'll be talking about that in the next lecture, about making clear attribution, clear documentation for all of your sources. So it's still sometimes a mystery, like where should we begin? I have no idea. So again, it's the questioning, it's the refining the research questions. Sometimes it's a series of questions that then arrive at a more narrow question. And then just to get some ideas, I've put up again some resources from our site that are familiar, right? That are IAEA and CTBTO and UN and so on. So students can, once they have a question, do a search at one of those sites where they know they're going to get verifiable information and good sources right away. So when we think about our approach, I like this aerial view of thinking about how we go from kind of the general to the more specific. We look at the overview of the topic. We make sure we know the terminology of the discipline. We want to then kind of zoom in and get closer and closer and dig deeper into the conversation, go deeper into the topic itself. So then it's a process of culling or collecting from different sources, the content lectures, the background research, the case studies, the other things that present themselves that may be relevant to the specific question that the team develops. One way to think about research is similar to the scientific method, right? So it's not all that different when you're kind of testing a hypothesis. You're going about, you have a theory or proposal based on scientific or logical reason, right? You're testing your theory. And in academic research, we talk about a thesis, right? So that main idea or argument that is critical or central to our debate or central to our essay, or in this case, a research paper or other research project. So this, this idea has to be testable, right? Has to be proven with evidence. So all these various findings, right, through the research, by looking at quotes from the various sources, looking at the content lectures, looking at all of these different sources as kind of the fodder, as you will, of the material from which one can then test and prove the thesis or hypothesis, right? And then going back to the metaphor of the landscape and then zooming in, I like the idea that we need to frame and narrow the scope of research to make sure it's very realistic, that you're not trying to take on too much within the period you have to accomplish your goal. It's always important, of course, to get approval of your topic and be very strategic in how you approach your topic, to really take the time necessary to make a proper outline and make sure that you're approaching it in a way where it's cohesive and clear, and you're going to reach your desired outcome. That said, it's also important to keep in mind that the research the process of it is very recursive. It's cyclical. It involves asking a question and then reflecting on it, thinking about what do we already know? How are we going to find out more? How are we going to connect and share? So the more we dive into the research, the more we have inquiry, the more we collect data, and then we have to keep fact checking and reflecting. So it's a very cyclical process, not a completely linear process. Also, narrowing the scope of the projects may sometimes mean eliminating material that's not relevant to one's scope of study. And sometimes that's difficult for students, right? They like, oh, but I spent so much time investigating this one area, and they want to retain it. Or people get very attached to their first drafts, or thinking that, oh, this must be, I've invested so much time, therefore it must be sufficient. But really where the learning comes is through the revision process, right? And looking at suggestions from within the team, making it as dynamic and original as possible, questioning each other in a constructive way, right? Coming up with you know, one team member might have a speculation and then another team member might have something else. So to continue the conversation within your groups and really have that time for reflection. Here at the Institute, we tend to do a lot of peer-based work. And of course, if students continue and they want to pursue this area as content area on a more professional level in their higher studies and so on, they'll find that that peer-based feedback is so essential and fruitful, constructive. So we want to see the depth of the students' original research, how they're really exploring and working together and trying to figure out a solution to their stated problem. I would say that, again, one of the most important things is collaborating and communicating, making sure that all members are contributing equally and sharing together, that everyone knows the common landscape, the common language for the discipline, that they have a shared content and vocabulary. A good idea would be if you are all on Google, this is an option, is to work with collaborative documents, to have a collaborative vocabulary drive and a place to keep your quotations, a place to keep collaborative documents that you want to work on together. This just facilitates that. Or you may have some other platform in which you can do that in your country. But it's a very convenient way to work together, communicate to each other about dividing up the tasks and how you want to approach it. One of the most important things is discerning about your sources when you conduct research, and again, testing the authority of where did you get this resource, and is it reliable? Does it have an inherent bias? What is the position? And then let's talk about that position. Maybe it's appropriate to the conversation. We want to especially be open-minded, inclusive, and have inclusive language. Make good choices with regard to your language. In English, we tend to use they, of course, for the plural, and then he, she, when we're not sure whether it's male or female for inclusive language, when we're referring back to someone in the singular. So we don't have kind of a standard singular form other than the he, she when we're talking about an author, for example, or someone where we need to refer back in the singular. So having inclusive language is really important. Sharing, looking at multiple perspectives on your topic, continuing to make inquiries together, being realistic about the scope of your project, and of course having a lot of collaboration, communication, and enrichment. This is a process about going deeply into a critical issue and figuring out solutions. And we know that we've been very impressed with what the youth has produced to this point in the past few years. It's been amazing. So I know that allowing that spark of imagination is really important, and allowing students to really follow the line of inquiry where they are led to come up with some wonderful solutions. So I would like to maybe pause our conversation there and invite Masako to come back. Hi, Masako.
Hi, thank you very much, Marie. So this is very useful. I don't have a specific questions, but I'm now looking at your final slide, like a communication are the key. So I may want to suggest one thing to all the students and the teachers. I know students, each school is going to have each presentation and a mini project, but I always want to encourage all the schools to communicate with, especially like schools in the US can talk to the Japanese schools and the Russian schools to exchange their ideas. I really think that will really enhance your project, and also towards the spring conference, by communicating each other beforehand, you can also, when you meet at the conference, you can establish more strong bond and friendship. So I would really like to encourage all the participating schools to communicate each other. Even.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Masako. And just having attended the conference last year, I saw what a great bond that the students made together. And I know that some of those conversations are continuing and those friendships are continuing. And so while they're very targeted on their specific scope of research and study, it's also about the connections and building these partnerships and relationships across countries. And I know the students have really benefited a lot from that experience.
Great, yeah, thank you. So I hope all the students and the teachers are going to go through these lectures and incorporate the instruction when you work on the project. So as I already mentioned, tomorrow I'm going to talk about more specific topics for the mini project. So let me stop here. Then we are going to move to Marie's next lecture. So let me stop here first. Thank you.